These my dollars make it hurt.
Welcome back to the Deep Cover Podcast. Been a couple of weeks since we've put out an episode, but as everyone knows, the NFL never stops, right? Just because the season ends, the Super Bowl's over, the NFL is a 12-month-a-year deal, a juggernaut. And so there's free agency looming, the draft, actually a combine, I think is coming up next week, right? And then free agency and then the draft. So there's just always stuff to talk about when it comes to the NFL. So we're here to talk about it. But joining us tonight, we have a very special guest. Before I touch base with Chris and Carey to see how they've been doing, we are joined by Brian McFarland from Russell Street Report at Ravens Salary Cap on Twitter. You know him, you love him. He gives you all of the Ravens salary cap information and more. You know, I just want to say, Brian, not every fan base has a guy like you. Maybe nobody has you specifically in terms of the accuracy and the information that you provide. So it's a real resource for all of the Ravens fans to have you and to be able to pick your brain. You're always very engaging and interactive with people on Twitter, as long as they don't come at you with spot rack numbers. We're glad to have you back, friend of the show. People who have been with us for years probably remember we've had you on before. So it's good to have you back. How have you been?
Good. I appreciate you guys having me on. It's kind of my time of the year coming up. So it's I kind of hate this lull. You end the season, you get to the Super Bowl, and then it's like, okay, let's go. And then it's this week or two, and we're getting to the franchise period where teams can start doing that. And some teams are starting to release guys, but there's kind of like that anticipation, and then you get this little lull before really, I guess, next week, once March hits, everything seems to start picking up. So
yeah, and I think you mentioned that we might find out about compensatory picks this Friday.
Yeah, if history holds, it should be Friday. They usually do it at the combine, since comp picks are now tradable. All the conversations start at the combine, so they usually announce them then. Looks like we should get 2/4. It doesn't look like Judon's contract and his playing time, and he missed a couple postseason honors, and that might have been able to get up to a third there, but they'll get the third for losing Culley, poor guy, and then they should have 2/4. So it's a nice little haul for sure.
Yeah, pour one out for Coach Culley. Got a raw deal, I think.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely, 100%.
I think going there and with the way that roster was projected to look, what he did was pretty impressive in terms of record and how he got guys to play, and then to get the axe after 1 year was really a raw deal. But once they put that rule in place, and so you could get a comp pick for coaches, the Ravens are going to be the beneficiary of that this year. Yeah. So we'll see. Like you said, hopefully this Friday we'll know for sure what those picks look like. But let me touch base with Chris and Carey, and then we'll jump into this thing. Chris, I'll start with you. How you been, man? Somebody's birthday was recently, right? Was it you? Who had a birthday?
Yeah, it was my youngest daughter's birthday yesterday. She turned 3, and she wasn't happy about it. She wanted to stay 2. But I've been good, man. I missed you guys. I missed talking to you. Happy to have Brian back on. It's always good to chop it up with him and listen to what he has to say. So I'm excited to get into this one.
Absolutely. Carey, good to see you and talk to you as always, man. We know you've been on the front lines of COVID down there in North Carolina. Hopefully have eased up for you a little bit, because I know there was a stretch of time there where it was all happening down there for you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, a lot of relief since then, man. Things are getting back to normal. So, I'm glad to be chopping it up with you guys. We've been working on this for a couple weeks behind the scenes, trying to put everything together as far as this episode. So, I'm excited to bring this to the people.
Well, without any further ado, I turn the keys over to you. I'm gonna get in the back seat and prop my feet up a little bit until it's time for me to be the main agent And
We're gonna see a different mic this episode.
really the same one that people have always seen. They're just like, oh, okay, yeah, that's who we have.
All right, man. So let's get it going. So, those of you have been listening to this show for a while. You've seen us do a mock draft episode. So we're going to do a mock free agency episode this time. We're going to try to go through and simulate free agency for the Ravens. Try to simulate that whole experience. So shout out to Nate Duncan and Danny LaRue. They kind of who I've got this idea from. They do a Dunk Dawn podcast. It's an NBA podcast. And they do a mock free agency. They do a mock trade deadline, all these different things. So I thought it would be cool to bring it to the football space. It's going to be different, definitely different dynamics, but, super excited to try to see what we can come up with for the Ravens, try to put them in position to get back in contention for a Super Bowl. So first thing I want to do is kind of outline what the roles are going to be. So tonight I'm going to play Eric DaCosta. Tonight, my man Chris is going to play the role of Ozzie Newsome. Is going to be my right-hand man. And then Brian McFarland, he's going to play the role as Pat Morardi, our cap guy. He's going to make sure we got all of our decades in a row, making sure we're not out here, putting anything on the credit card, spending too much money. And then Mike is going to play the role as the player agent. So, we got some negotiations to do tonight. Me and Mike are already kind of pre-negotiated, and, he's let me know in so many terms that it's not going to be any friendly player deals going on tonight. So, I'm going to have my work cut out for me. So we're going to go ahead and get it going. Now, we did a little bookkeeping, before this. So all of the exclusive rights free agents that the Ravens have, we're going to go ahead and tender them. So that's going to be Tristan Colon. That's going to be Aaron Crawford. It's going to be Khalil Dorsey, Tyler Huntley, Brandon Knight, Nick Moore, Geno Stone, Christian Welch, and Tyson Williams. So I'm going to bring all those guys back into the fold. We have a couple of restricted free agents out there, Arturo Alaka, and then cornerback Chris Westry. We're not going to give a tender to Alaka, but we're going to give a low tender to Chris Westry. That's going to be worth $2.54 million. And all these numbers are courtesy of the man right here with us today, Brian McFarland. We couldn't do this without his work, so thanking him for that. And then also we got a few lower scale minimum deals that don't require a lot of negotiation. So we're going to go ahead and lock those guys in now. 1 year deals for linebacker Josh Bynes at the minimum. 1 year minimum deal for linebacker LJ Ford coming back. 1 year minimum deal for quarterback Josh Johnson coming back. 1 year deal for running back Devontae Freeman coming back on the minimum. Also, safety Tony Jefferson, bringing him back on the minimum deal. Tight end Eric Tomlinson, bringing him back on a minimum deal. And then also offensive tackle David Sharp, we're going to bring him back on a 1 year minimum deal. And then lastly, linebacker Chris Board, we're going to bring him back on a 1 year deal as well. So that's going to kind of set the scene for where we are kind of heading into things. Now we need to kind of talk through some people here. We're up against the cap, so we need to kind of make some moves to create some space. So as we talk through these guys, we're going to kind of take it around the room and get everybody's thoughts, and then kind of come to a consensus. First one I'm looking at, to me, is sort of a no-brainer. No disrespect to this player at all, but Ali Villanueva, slated to save $6 million by releasing him. Again, like I say, no disrespect to the player, but considering our cap situation, I think for me it's a no-brainer move. But I want to kind of take it around the room and see what you guys think as far as that move goes.
I'll let Brian go first. You're the guest.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it is, and he sounded at the end of the year sounded like a pretty beat up guy for the way he played, and I know he was hurt a lot towards the end, and I mean he may well retire before they make that decision. But either way, it's $6 million in cap space. It's you want to release as few guys as possible and get the most money. So when you look at a guy who you can get 6 out of, then that's a good spot to do it. So I don't think there's any question. One way or another, he's gone.
Chris?
Yeah, I agree. It's pretty much a no-brainer, like Brian said. And whether he's decides to keep playing or whether he retires, either way, he's definitely not going to be on the Ravens roster next year.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's one of those, the business side, right, of the game you hear about. I mean, a guy they brought in to maybe play right tackle, Stanley, kind of goes out there in that first game and he's not himself. So they kind of put him on the shelf for a while, then end up shutting him down for the whole year. And Villanueva has to flip back to his more natural position at left tackle. And, had some ups and downs for sure, but and battled through some injuries like Brian said. But, for what he was asked to do, going from left tackle to right tackle, then back to left tackle, he battled. But unfortunately, like we've all kind of touched on, it's the business side of the game, and that's the way it goes.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and finalize that move. So Ali Villanueva, we're going to release him. Another guy on this list for me, and it's tough because I do like the way that this guy competes on special teams. But when you look at the depth in the room, especially the young depth in the room, I'm looking at Miles Boykin as a guy saving $2.5 million with his release. Again, just looking at, the young talent they have in the room, especially when you factor in a guy like Tylan Wallace, who does go in there and compete on special teams as well. I think this is another kind of no-brainer release. So, this is another one. I'll take it around the room and see what you guys think. But
yeah, I mean, I think he's kind of a victim of circumstances, his own success in a little bit, in that his playing time had him reach an escalator. So his salary would have been $965, I think, this year. But by virtue of it's called the Proven Performance Escalator. I always have trouble saying that. So that jumped his salary up to the low RFA tender. Since it used to be rookies got 3-year contracts and then were RFAs and can get a bigger salary in that 4th year. Now with the new CBA, it's a flat structure, but if you play enough in those first 3 years, you do get a chance to jump that salary. That's what he got, and now it's probably going to be his way out of town, unfortunately.
Yeah, this one hurts because this was a guy that I really liked a lot coming out of Notre Dame, and I definitely didn't see it coming this way for him to be, his biggest contribution is a gunner, so this one hurts, but you just got to rip the Band-Aid off at this point and just try to cut your losses and move on and go with the young guns that are on the roster.
But he's a damn good gunner, Chris. This one is painful to me. I love special teams. It's near and dear to my heart because there's so many guys. That's where they kind of cut their teeth. Coming into the league, that's where they kind of develop and carve out a niche for themselves, and then sometimes create a bigger role for themselves on defense or offense. And we've seen it year after year with guys from the Ravens. But for whatever reason, it's hard to put your finger on it, but it just didn't materialize for him at wide receiver with any kind of regularity, right? With any kind of consistency. There were, plays here and there, but it just never really materialized with him and Lamar. And it's a shame because, like you said, you look at the profile, right? Big guy, was 6'4", 220. We all probably remember the combine numbers. So, yeah, that part of it is tough and has always done whatever they asked him to do. Whether it's special teams in the run game, going in and blocking and getting his hands dirty. But hey, it's always about what have you done for me lately, and kind of like what Brian said. Unfortunately, he's played his way into this number where they can actually save some cap, and by releasing him, and then you have these other younger guys. Look, Tylen Wallace will go in there and mix it up too. We've seen that. So it's hard. I'm like, I can't get off of I can't just let him go without saying a few words like a eulogy. I'm done. That's it.
So those are the two guys that kind of stood out to me as kind of more of the easier choices. I'm going to throw this one around the room. Is there any other guys that you see that could represent some savings that you have a kind of strong feeling about moving on from? I'll start with you, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, the one I think that's probably the tougher. It's a tough decision, but it's again that you look for that guy that you can save a lot of cap space, with one release as opposed to releasing 5 guys to make $6 million, and that's Tavon Young. And obviously, I mean, he this past year probably is best year since his contract year when he got the contract, but. He was healthy for most of the year till right at the end. But he was banged up here and there. But, I think he played every game. So, which is the first time in 4 years? It was 4 years ago. I think 4 seasons ago was the last time he played all 16 or 17 now games. So, it's with that injury history, and sometimes you got to think, with just kind of with Boykin as well, with $2.5 million, there's also a cash component to this. It's not just the cap number. Is he worth that much cash? And is Tavon Young worth close to $6 million outlay and that risk? Unfortunately, and you got to factor it in, that risk that his history says is a decent chance, and maybe more than a decent chance, that he gets hurt, and then that $6 million you cannot use elsewhere. You could probably sign his replacement for a first-year cap number of less than $6 million. So isn't that better to, it's the trade-off. So I always like the guy. He's worked his rear end off, obviously, to get back from these injuries over the years. But he seems snake bit, and that's the one. And again, that's of guys you're thinking about releasing. That's again the place you can get a nice chunk of change. So now maybe they can rework a deal with him. Maybe they can extend him, lower this cap number, make things more reasonable. Maybe they go to him and say we need a pay cut, and and maybe that's the avenue. And who knows if he'll agree to either of those, but. They do have the ability to say, I think it's a legitimate issue. Hey, if you don't play ball with us, we're cutting you, and we don't think you're getting $6 million somewhere else. And I think there's a decent argument there with his history. He may not get that.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And it's, a lot of people, they say, he was healthy. He played every game. But when you look at the context of it, he was banged up a lot of the season too. Like there were a lot of times where he had to jump out of the game and, be on a snap count. So it wasn't just a picture of health. Comparatively speaking to the rest of the CB group, yeah, he was the Iron Man, but the standard of health for the CB room was not that high this year. So can we bank on that happening again? History tells us no, but like Brian said, we know he has a great relationship with Eric DeCosta, and DeCosta took a chance on him, and he went to DeCosta when he was banged up, and he was like, "Look, don't give up on me." And DeCosta was, he said, "I'm not going to give up on you." So maybe it's that time to repay that back. Who knows? But we do know that they have a good relationship there, so that's one avenue that could be traveled if you want to go down that road.
That's probably the toughest of some of these moves that we're looking at or thinking about for me, just because of everything you guys have said, and particularly the part about, what he's gone through in terms of rehabbing and getting back so that he could play even, up to whatever that standard was last year. Obviously different people are going to look at it differently, but just to be able to get back, like you said, you go back, you miss all of 2019. You miss all but one game in the first quarter of the Texans game in 2020, which is the second game of the year. You know about the neck injuries. And so just everything he's had to go through to get back to play at that level, whatever you think that level was last year, it's hard, when you think about that with guys. But that's, again, that is the business. That is how it goes. And that's why, people in that position like Eric DaCosta, they've got to make these tough decisions. They got to make these hard calls. So I probably lean that way. It hurts to even say it. I really don't want to.
Yeah. Well, and I think he's only 28, or it might even be 27 now, 28 next year. I mean, even if 29, it's still relatively young. It seems like he's been here for a long, long time. And I guess because the injuries just made it seem longer, but or he was just young, extra young when he was drafted. But yeah, I mean, he's a pretty young guy still, but those injuries, that's just so hard to overlook.
Now, can I ask, before you go back, Carey, can I ask Brian about a couple of these guys? So I put that chart up earlier, and for those who don't know, I imagine a bunch of people who are listening to this, tuning in because you're with us, have already seen your work on Russell Street Report and seen this article and the chart that just went out. It was earlier this week, or was it?
Yes, it was Monday. Yeah, Monday, just yesterday.
Right.
Yeah,
I read it. So a couple guys, I know these are potential moves. These are not moves that you're saying will happen.
Right.
Just hey, these are potential moves. So I just wanted to ask you. Juwan James, do you lean towards a release in that situation, or were you just saying, hey, it could be done and here's what they would save if they did it?
Yeah, I'm not, other than the three we just talked about, I don't lean towards releasing any of them. They're just guys that have been talked about. James, obviously, he's coming off of an injury and then sat out for COVID. So that he's very reasonable, whether it's as a backup tackle or as a swing tackle, or even the starter if it comes to that. So I mean, that the only reason I put him on there is if they didn't like his rehab, the way he approached rehab or something like that, and they just didn't think it was going to happen, then it's then he's on that list. And because, $3 million it's not huge, but it's nothing to sneeze at either. So, I mean, that's the only reason I had him on that list.
Okay. So Ben Powers falls in that same bucket.
Yeah, same one. I don't see Powers. I mean, Powers may not make the 53 in September, and then you get a little extra cap savings at that point. But I don't know, as a solid enough backup, guard, I think, I think 2.5 is not terribly unreasonable. Unfortunately for Boykin, as the 6th or 7th wide receiver, it's probably unreasonable. But as a solid guy you can plug in, Powers doesn't set the world on fire, I realize, but but that's a decent price there.
And the last one I'll ask about, it seems like his name comes up every year. He's a little long in the tooth, but Sam Cook, who's still producing at an effective level, but the age and the money, it's
yeah. I mean, I get asked on Twitter every year for the last 5 years, I think, and when they had the guy they traded to Minnesota and they had him kicking and punting, let's save him, let's save money. I only put him on this year because his last year was a little bit of a down year for him. And I think his last punt was a 20-yard punt or something like that. In the last game. So, but you gotta, it's that Holder part of it that he and Tucker are so good together. Yeah. And I think that's really not, he had his first incomplete pass of his career. So his career must be over at this point, So, I don't see that happening. I think he's probably not going to have a lot of cap savings, but I could see them tacking 2 more years on his deal. At a reasonable price, drop that number slightly. And then they feel that they get a little bit of cap space. He gets a little bit of security that way.
I think Bill Belichick called him the best holder he'd ever seen or something like that.
Yeah.
So, high praise for a guy who knows special teams, but all right, I'll get back in the backseat. Sorry, Carey.
So I'm debating this Tavon Young thing, man, compelling arguments both ways. Brian, I'll ask you, as far as a restructure, what would that look like compared to an outright release from a saving standpoint?
Yeah, so the outright release is $5.84 million. With a with a restructure, you would drop that down to the minimum, which would be about $1 million. I'm not gonna get the exact number, but it's about $1 million there. So that's 4.8 in savings, but he's going to get some kind of bonus. So, usually when you're giving a guy an extension, he's not getting less money than he would get. Now, Tavon's a little different situation because it's sort of it would kind of probably be a pay cut / extension, sort of scenario. So if he got a $4 million bonus, let's just say, and they tack 3 years on, so that's 4 years total. So that cap number, that 5.84 goes down to about $2 million. So you've saved, you've saved. Now, bonus could be a little, if it's 5, then he gets close to what he already got. So, then he's not losing any money this year, but he's getting cash. So maybe that's 3. So you're only saving, 3.8. So somewhere in that range, you can make that happen.
Gotcha. So I guess, can we see where we are from a cap perspective right now, as far as the space we have with the moves? Sure.
So if, I'm going to add one move on, because I think it's definitely going to happen. And, a restructure, playing just a simple restructure, base salary reduced, kind of just like what we just talked about with Tavon. But I think Marlon Humphrey, that's going to happen with him.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, Stanley's another candidate, but given and if he was 100% healthy, I think that would happen as well. But I don't think you want to mess with that right now because of his, obviously, if you listen to some people, his return is very questionable. Others make it sound like he's going to be fine. So who knows? So I don't think you're going to touch that unless they feel very strongly that he's going to be 100%. So Humphrey, his a restructure would create 7.1 million. So again, a nice chunk of change there. That chart, why I do that chart is there's a section in there called projected future expenses that, when we talk about, the Ravens have 20 million in cap space, well, they don't have that to spend. And that's what my article was yesterday, trying to get people to understand that there's about almost 16 million in future expenses alone. Well, that's the draft picks, that's your practice squad, that's an injury replacement fund. As we saw last year, last year I projected 5 million and they blew by that. And, in the first week of the season, it seemed like, so I projected that up to 6 million. And then you have your, you don't think about it, but every week you elevate somebody from the practice squad. Now, the healthier they are, the less they would have to do that. But they've used that to their advantage too, of bringing up guys in spots they needed any given week. And if somebody was a little banged up, they didn't have to force a guy out there. They could bring somebody up. So that's an expense too. So when you add all those together, and you got to remember too, they're picking 14 in every, 14 in the first round and other rounds because they were tied. So some is 13 and some is 15, I think. So, that's higher than they've been in a while. So their draft, and they got 10 picks. So their draft pool alone is $12 million. Now, that's offset this time of year because some of those guys will go into the top 51, some won't. So the net effect is really only about 4 million, but still, that adds up with your injury replacement fund and your practice squad. So, that takes a big chunk out of everything. So if you factor that in, I'm going to release Tavon. I'm sorry. I'm going to call it a release because, it's too many variables there to say for sure.
Right.
So when you factor all that in, releasing Villanueva, Boykin, and then restructuring Humphrey, that gives us about 13 million to work with. Not a lot.
Okay.
Not a lot.
Yeah.
Now there are other options. Zeitler can be restructured for a little under 2.5. Seems a pretty safe bet on that. It's not a huge amount to add to his cap number for next year. So that's something you could do. Marcus Peters is in the last year of his deal. This is more of a variable because that's $10 million in salary. You can create a lot of cap space there. It's coming off of injury, so they got to factor that in. Obviously, we saw a lot of guys this year coming off of injury, didn't work out so well. So, but an extension there could create, 4 or 5 million, maybe more. So, that's a decent chunk of change there. So those are all things, pretty much talked about everybody else on the list. So those are things to, if you guys, we can put some money in there and say, okay, we're extending Peters. Let's, well, you can add $5 million there. So, and of course, Lamar. I think we all expected Lamar to be done. And that's, my guess is that would save $10 million, on his cap number for this year. It's 23. That first year, the cap number is usually low because he's getting a ton of cash. He's getting a $40 million bonus, and that's spread out over the first 5 years of the deal. So, that's $10 million, a $2 million salary. That's a 12 million cap number, and you've saved 11 million. So, I don't know. I don't know what to think of that one. I don't know what to think that it's not done. Either they're lowballing the hell out of him, or he's asking to be paid more than Mahomes. And there seems to be a big gap there. So we may never see that get done this year, but that's a nice place to get cap space. So, I'll add in Zeitler being restructured because I think that's an easy one too.
Oh yeah.
And I'll ask her, what are your feelings on Peter's extension?
I'm all for it. I'm all for the Peters extension. He showed how valuable he is to this team. I mean,
by not being there.
Yeah, exactly. And even just his presence on the sideline, you saw the difference of the team. So him
great
on the
teammate.
field, it's a no-brainer. And even before the season started, he was just talking about how being in Baltimore just kind of reinvigorated him and made him fall in love with the game again. And you got to bring that guy back, because he's just so damn important.
Yeah,
one thing about him too.
Oh, go ahead, Carey.
One thing about him too, I think that bodes well is, obviously at playing that position, you want a guy at his athletic peak. But, as we've seen with him, it's such a mental game for him. He studies film, studies, route combination, studies quarterbacks. I think he's a guy that even if he loses a step, will be able to impact the game because of those factors. So, that's another added layer of benefit for him.
That's what I was going to touch on, that mental aspect that he brings. I mean, he's calling plays during preseason games. The Rams game, he's giving guys all kinds of tips and things to look for on the sideline when they're playing the Rams. You've heard Wink say many times, he called him a football savant. He's like, he's a genius when it comes to football. And I think, his outward persona sometimes can belie that. Like it's hard to get past that for some people, but people who seem to know him and even coaches, who are able to gain his trust. Cause I think that's a big thing with him. You got to gain his trust before he's really gonna, kind of go all in with you. But people who have those kinds of relationships with him say that, this is just a genuine guy, a really good guy, really good teammate, and knows the game. So yeah, I was surprised, really, frankly, at DeCosta's press conference when he was like, "Yeah, we're bringing him back." I mean, I thought there might have been a little bit more of a hedge, not that they wouldn't per se, but just they might hedge it a little bit. But that seemed like between him and Harbaugh, they both were like, "Nah, he's coming back."
Yeah, and so, I mean that has happened before, and the numbers didn't work out. So
didn't go.
The Bolden would be the one. We definitely want Anquan back. I mean, there was no reservation about that, and then obviously it didn't work out. So, and obviously a lot of it, it depends on the extension, depends on his recovery as well, where they think he's at. But his injury was early enough. It fingers crossed, shouldn't be an issue. But obviously, again, as we've seen, it hasn't always worked out that way. All right, so that gets us to a little over 20 mil. So now we got some things. Now we got some space to work with.
Yeah. So I'm going to move into the next kind of phase. The Ravens free agents, I put them in kind of buckets, for different situations. This next group I want to kind of walk through you guys with were guys that, in my estimation, I was leaning towards just moving forward from. And I'll give you the list of guys and I'll take it around the room and you let me know if there's anybody on this list you kind of want to advocate for bringing back. So the list is wide receiver Sammy Watkins, running back Latavius Murray, defensive lineman Justin Ellis, cornerback Anthony Averett, cornerback Jimmy Smith, edge Pernell McPhee, and then defensive lineman Brandon Williams. So I'll start with you, Brian. If any of those guys pop out to you as somebody that you would be interested in bringing back into the fold.
Yeah, I mean, I think they could lose all of them and it wouldn't be the end of the world. Ellis and Williams on the defensive line, they have to get younger. Ellis was on a minimum deal anyway. That one wouldn't hurt my feelings on a minimum deal again because he does provide a little depth. I guess if you got Brandon Williams back on an absolute minimum deal, I'd be for that too. But not both of them certainly, but one of them, figuring they're going to draft at least one and probably two defensive linemen out of those 10 picks. So. The corners, Averett, I guess Averett and Elliott are guys that, Elliott obviously with injuries, you get to the same thing you get with Tavon Young. He's been injured just about as much. If he comes back on a minimum deal because nobody's interested in him, I think all of them are kind of minimum deal guys, and Averett's going to get more than the minimum. He played well enough, but I think at times he certainly got exposed. He would have a great game and then the next game not have such a great game. So I think he'll price his way out for what they'll be looking for. And I also expect them to draft a couple corners as well. So McPhee, kind of the same thing. They need to get younger on the edge. They started that. I guess you'll get to Houston at some point too. But if you sign Houston, and you draft an end outside edge, then I don't think you need McPhee back. If you can't get Houston, maybe you bring McPhee back.
What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, the McPhee one hurts because he's like one of my all-time favorite Ravens, and you get to a point where it's like a boxer that he was great once. And you just see him kind of limping to the end of the career, and that's what we saw with McPhee this year. And that one hurts, but it's necessary. You always come down to this when it comes to these players. And one of the guys that I wanted to highlight was Justin Ellis, because I think he's a guy that you could bring back, and for really the vet minimum, and he can give you some pretty important rotational snaps at the nose. He's a guy who, started off really, really shaky with him. And I think, over this past season, he's proven himself, not to be a high level impact guy, but an important guy as far as having a rotational nose tackle, which they're hard to find in the league. And I think bringing him back, I think it'd be a smart decision.
Yeah, I didn't really have a problem with any of the moves, Carey, that you mentioned. I lean a little bit towards the point Chris is making, just because of how young that defensive line room would be. And I know they want to get young. So I'm not saying that's necessarily a negative thing, but if Ellis is gone, I fully expect probably Brandon Williams to be gone. You got Derek Wolfe, another guy coming off an injury. We're probably going to say that about a bunch of guys going into next year. But then you got Justin Madubuike going into his third year, Broderick Washington going into his third year, Khalil McKenzie, who gives you the twofer because he's also listed as a guard in terms of the defensive. It's a little twofer action with him, but I think he's going into his fourth year. So you get a pretty young room in there, and I know they want to get young, but you feel like you probably want at least one kind of veteran presence guy in there. Maybe that can be Wolfe if Wolfe is healthy and can come back and play, but I think that's kind of an if. That's an unknown at this point. So yeah, maybe somewhere along the line. If it's not Justin Ellis, maybe it's kind of that third wave. I was going to say second wave, but they're really kind of like that third wave of free agency. Maybe there's some guy, defensive tackle or somebody who's got a little bit more experience who they could bring in, kind of like what they did with Ellis a couple years ago when they brought him in. So I just think it's good to try to have at least 1 to 2 vets in every room, because I think we've seen in some years gone by where they've been like super young at certain position groups, and it didn't work out. I always think back to the Peanut and the Kenny Young year, and it was like they just weren't ready to handle those roles, those linebacker roles, in terms of the volume that they were playing that year after CJ left. You just needed somebody else to give a kind of a veteran presence in every room. We kind of saw it again this year when they had to bring Bynes back. I mean, you need that veteran presence in these position groups. Doesn't have to be a bunch of guys. Could be one guy or two guys, but but for the purposes of what we're doing tonight, I think we kind of do have to go that way because, we're trying to free up as much as we can and then, see what we can do with it.
Yeah, well, two things on that. A guy like him will actually come back for cheaper than some rookies because if he signs the veteran minimum deal, he actually gets paid the veteran minimum for his service time, but for the cap purposes, it goes down to what a second-year player would be making. So that's the way they keep veterans around. It was put in 2 CBAs ago to keep veterans around because otherwise they were just kicking veterans like that to the curb because we'll keep the young guys. So that it doesn't even signing Ellis wouldn't even affect the cap. Whoever he's replacing, it might even save some money depending upon who he's technically replacing on the 53. Wolf is an interesting one. There's only $200,000 in savings for Wolf. He just had surgery. Now, we don't know all the details, but he didn't play all year. They finally ended his season sometime in December, and he just had surgery earlier this month, I think. So that's and I don't know, not saying maybe there's nothing to that, but they thought he was going to come back. He never came back. Doesn't have a big salary. It's only $2 million, which for his role, if he's healthy, is a bargain. But if they don't feel he's going to be healthy, it's where I come back to cash a lot. Is he worth $2 million in cash? Sometimes it's not just the cap number. It's what, why don't we spend that $2 million somewhere else? Even though he's going to be basically a wash on the cap, it's $200,000 savings. So, but teams do look at cash too. Of is he worth that money? And there's some rumors they weren't happy with him in his recovery. So, so whether it's true or not, and but that's a guy who could also go. It's not a cap decision. It's obviously a performance issue.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And, considering where he was hurt, the back and being up in age, that makes me very, very leery.
Yeah.
But looking back at these guys and, the list I laid out are all guys that I think can play. There's just certain, variables at play. Anthony Averett, I think he played enough last year. I think he's going to kind of price himself out. And with the decision to tender Westry, I think, we're keeping Peters. Obviously, we're keeping Humphrey. We tender Westry. I think the rest of that is going to be, rookie players, mid-round, maybe even high picks at the cornerback position to kind of fill that group out. Along the defensive line, Brandon Williams, I think off of reputation alone, I think he's going to get a bigger deal out in free agency. Not saying he's going to break the bank, but I think he's going to get a bigger deal than, maybe we want to kind of spend, here. So that was my thought process with him. But you guys actually make a very, very interesting argument for Justin Ellis as being a guy that can just be that guy that can eat some snaps and also be that veteran in the room. One of the main goals in this for me, and I think the actual Eric DeCosta, I think he feels the same as far as replenishing in this defensive front. He talked about it in this presser, how they felt like this was the year they were going to have to kind of replenish the group and get some youth and get some talent, in that position. But like you guys said, you have to have veterans in the room. And, he's a guy, especially if Brandon's going to be gone. Ellis is a guy that can eat some snaps. So I'm going to amend this. I'm all for bringing back Ellis at a minimum deal.
Yeah, and I mean, keep in mind if he's not one of the top 6 defensive linemen or 7, whatever they're going to carry in September, then you're cutting him, and there's no cap consequences because he's I don't think he even got a signing bonus this last year. So it's just I think there was a little bit of guaranteed money actually, but a couple $100,000. So it's not going to hurt your cap by giving that a shot. And like I said, if the young guys play great and he's expendable, then it's not going to be a big deal for him.
Like you always say, Carey, insurance for your insurance.
There you go. All right, so now we've reached a point now where we're going to put our negotiation hats on. The Ravens have some, well-known free agents that have been bandied about on Twitter and everywhere else over the last couple weeks. So we're going to open negotiation with some of these guys. We're going to start with our starting center, Bradley Bozeman. So, I'm going to turn the floor over to his agent, and, we're going to start the process of, what kind of contract you're looking for Mr. Bozeman.
Oh, we're looking for Frank Ragnow money. I mean, we need we need that top center money, baby. No, seriously. I think this is me kind of stepping outside of his agent's role. I mean, I think you're probably looking for something that's maybe an average of that top 10, top 15-ish center group. Top 10, maybe pushing it a little bit. Maybe we're top 15, top 20. Somewhere in that group, maybe some kind of average of that. I mean, I think, Brian, you talked about it before we started recording. He's probably looking for something closer to that $10 million a year range. So that's towards the top end of that top 10 center, grouping. But, I was looking at OTC's numbers, and when you start to come down that list and you get to like that 9th, 10th, 11th guy, you're looking at guys like Connor McGovern. He's averaging $9 million a year. Chase Roulier, which kind of shocked me for the Commanders. He's making $10 million a year. And then some older guys like Jason Kelsey, he's right around 9. Mitch Morris up in Buffalo, he's right around 7. So I'm thinking, Brian, you talked about it. Somewhere in that probably 7 to 10 million a year range. What that total looks like, I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends on the signing bonus that they would negotiate. But you got to think that he's probably looking for a 3-year deal. I wanted to ask you about this, Brad. Actually, it just popped into my mind because I've been seeing this a lot when sites, whether it's PFF or other sites, are projecting like free agent contracts. A lot of them seem to be like 2 or 3 year deals, and I'm wondering, is this like a new TV contract or something, right, coming up?
Yeah, I mean, the money is expected next year. That may be, I mean, from PFF standpoint, I'm pretty sure that's Brad who's doing all that. And Brad is he's taken the agent courses and things like that. So it may be coming from that more the agent perspective. Agent perspective is generally as much money you can get in the short term. Don't get yourself locked in. And the teams generally want the longer term because it spreads the money out. And it also means the later years you can cut the guy with little trouble. Whereas when the player has the more control, obviously a longer term contract, the player wants more guaranteed money and some guaranteed money spread in the later years. So you can't just get to the last couple of years and say bye-bye, and then I didn't get my big money in those last couple of years. So the shorter contracts seem to be more of a new wave with the agents, and players are starting to come around to it a little bit too. Part of it, though, I think is also we used to be able to project out, but the pandemic has totally changed that. Obviously, last year, the cap went down to 182, and we're back up now. We took a big jump this year. We're expecting a big jump next year, maybe a bigger jump, but because that's when the true money comes in. But the NFL always has a way of flattening it out, so they don't like the big jumps because then all the teams spend crazy because we got all this extra money, and then 2 years or 3 years later, they're eating those contracts and eating a bunch of dead money. And so the league likes to try to spread those out. So try to protect the teams from themselves, I guess we'll say. So I think, there's probably going to be a big jump next year, but that short-term contract, that maybe have something to do with that. And a lot of the older guys, I think that's better for the teams too, generally, to have just 1 year deals. And in some cases it's 1 year prove it deals too. So I was just thinking, as you were saying, you wanted Frank Ragnow money. I was thinking, this is exactly why Lamar needs an agent. Because if you came to me as the Ravens and said that, I'd be, you're kidding, and we love Bradley, but no way. I know you start high and I start low, but no, and that's why that's why you need an agent, because you don't want to hurt the guy's feelings. Lamar's obviously a very proud person, and and he for whatever reason he seems to be a punching bag for a lot of national people, and undeservedly so. But he's got that chip on his shoulder for that, and hopefully it's a really good motivator for him. But then when you got your own team coming in and saying, he wants Mahomes money if that's what he's asking, and they're like, no, you're Derek Carr money. That's an exaggeration, but if they're saying you're not worth 40, we want to do 38 and have a bunch of incentives and escalators for you to earn it, and he's like, no, I'm as good as Mahomes, so that's where it's got to be tough, especially this kind of deal, with it's your franchise, he's the franchise, and that's got to be a tough negotiation when you don't have that buffer there, and maybe that's part of the problem, who knows.
Yeah, so
sorry to go tangent there, but
no, that's a good tangent. Because I think we're looking at this trying to look at this from both sides. We're trying to look at what we think the team would be willing to pay, what they would consider reasonable, but then also what the player is probably going to be seeking. And even I was just kind of joking about the Ragnow thing. I don't even know if Bradley would him or his agent. I don't even know if either one of them would seriously say that's what they're looking for. But you got to think he's probably somewhere, if we're just talking about total guaranteed money. I don't know what the years would look like or the bonuses, but just total guarantees, he's probably 15-20 million. Probably.
Yeah, and part's not the problem, because you're going to have the signing bonus. They usually guarantee as a way to keep the signing bonus down, which is good, because now they kind of got away from this with the pandemic, because they just had to create as low of cap number as possible. But what they've been trying to do prior to that was you'd have your relatively modest signing bonus, but they'd fully guarantee the first and the second year of the deal. And that would jump that guaranteed money up, but it would keep it away from being dead money down the road, because salary is salary. Once you pay it, once that year's done, that's gone, and you don't have those bonus prorations down the end. So with Bradley, maybe just leaving aside the average per year, if he gets a $10 million bonus over a 5-year deal, that's $2 million proration, about $1 million base salary, and you're looking at a $3 million cap number in that first year. And again, then it would go up, and the years after that, it would be relatively flat at bigger numbers. But that's how you keep that first year. And maybe they wouldn't go all the way down to 3. Maybe they do it at 4. Not going too low, because again, then you're building bigger base salaries on the back end. So, I think they, and then the average per year. I personally can't see them going beyond 8 or 9. I'm not even sure they get there. I think 8 would probably be their ceiling. So then it's just a question of, there are other centers out there. A lot of these ratings you see, he's not rated that highly on the top 100. Ben Jones from who's older, I believe, but he's out there, and he's above him on most lists. And he's not even getting anywhere near the money, in these projections that Bozeman, at 8 to 10 or more is allegedly looking for, based on some reports. So, that's where I think if he gets that offer, he's gone, obviously. But if he doesn't get what he's looking for, maybe they got a chance of bringing him back at, $8 million a year or something like that.
And I was going to say, that seems to be the way, we knew Ozzie talked about that all the time, that, hey, he's going to make their offer, and then you can go and test the market, right? And it seems like Eric is kind of following in that footsteps, because I think when they talked about these guys, when he was at his presser, he didn't say the specific words, but I think he kind of all but said, hey, these guys are all going to test the market.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah,
that's
it wasn't like Peters is going to be back. It wasn't said anything like that. It was definitely more, you know, and you know, it was almost seemed with Bozeman, it almost seemed like there was almost a recognition that it probably wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. That's the sense that I got. I know, you know, his wife's on Twitter and they're showing these pictures of a new house being built in Tennessee. And I don't know, we're leaving. We're not leaving. And I'm like, this is gone. He's not coming back here. But I think that would be my approach as his agent. You know, I probably would, you know, Brian, you talked about that average per year. I probably like 4-ish, 5-ish, a little better than 3-ish. But I would say, hey, we're going to go out, we're going to test the market. And then, you know, if you know, you guys have made your offer and say, hey, if you don't get what you're looking for out there, you know, come back to the table and we can look at it again. I don't think that you can ask for much more than that. I mean, I don't know how that works out. Sometimes I wonder, like when teams say that, and let's say you go out and you don't find what you're looking for and you come back, is the price now changed? Or do they honor what they, you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think in some cases it's all timing. You know, you wait a week into free agency, and we may have done other things, and that offer's not there. You know, somebody we weren't budgeting for, or you know, one of our other players came back and said, you know what, we'll take your offer. We weren't expecting to come back, and now, you know, we're looking at, you know, $20 million in cap space, and you know, the $4 million or $5 million we were allocating to you isn't there anymore. You know, and it certainly can happen.
Yeah, so it carries some risk that way too. I mean, I know sometimes I think about it like, oh, they're going to test the market and they're going to go out there and be able to maximize their earning potential, but it carries some risk for them in that way too, because if the market doesn't materialize, you can go back like years ago with Ray, right, where he thought he was going to go out, and it didn't materialize the way he thought it was, and he's back here. So, but he was fortunate in that way. He was able to come back and work out whatever deal they worked out. But like you said, timing could throw that off for a guy like Bozeman. They say, hey, that ship's kind of sailed, man. Sorry, you know, hopefully you'll find something out there somewhere. But we're moving forward because they've got two guys on the roster too who can play the position.
Right.
A guy who's played the position, you know, going back to that 2019 year, Patrick McCarey, and then Cologne has even been in some games over 2020 and this year. He's gotten in a game or two. You know, there was a COVID game last year with the Steelers for sure, and then I think he was in a Bengals game or something like that too. So even he's got some snaps in regular season games. So, you know, I just think that all of that maybe kind of factors into, hey, you know, the cupboard isn't completely bare. This doesn't work out. And it's kind of been their pattern going back. If you look at the last couple of centers, that's kind of been the pattern, right? Is you get a guy, you develop him, he gets to the market, you let him go. The next guy in the pipeline comes up, right? That was Skura, and then it was Jensen, or was it Jensen first and then Skura? I think it was Jensen first, then Skura, then Bozeman. Yeah. That's kind of been the pattern.
Yeah, I mean, they, you know, the best centers, best young centers, quote unquote, they've had were Jason Brown and Jensen, and they weren't willing to pay. I think both of them, I think they got blown out of the water with both of them. Didn't expect the market to be so. I mean, I didn't expect Jensen to get that kind of deal. You know, I mean, I think he became the top paid center at the time, if I remember correctly. So, and now, you know, maybe that'll happen with Bozeman too. You know, I mean, stranger things have happened when it comes to free agency and, you know, and teams with money to burn, so to speak.
It only takes one. I remember with CJ, right? That Jets deal, that was like, whoa. Whoa. So it only takes one. But anyway, I don't know if that helps you at all, Carey, but it sounds like.
So well, let me try this. As the cap guy, Carey, we can $8 million is as high as we can go here.
I'm glad you said that, because that was my number as well. And me and Chris have had conversations. I'm gonna hit Chris on this. Chris has a certain guy in mind that he always says, if I'm gonna pay top of the market, I'm gonna pay for a top of the market player. And it just so happens my man Chris has a target at this position. So I'm gonna hit Chris to get his thoughts and see if those conversations we've had are still kind of in alignment.
So there's a term when you go back to an ex-lover, it's called spinning the block. And I think we should spin the block on Ryan Jensen and bring him back home, because just on as a player, he fits exactly what they want to do on offense. They've been talking about building a bully, and there's no better bully than Ryan Jensen right now. So you bring in Ryan Jensen. Not only are you bringing in a guy with the physicality and play style that he has, but you're also bringing in a guy who has played with Tom Brady for the last 2 years. So the knowledge and the little tips and tricks of the trade that he's gotten from Tom Brady, he could kind of, pass those along to Lamar as well. So you're getting leadership value, you're getting an upgrade on the field, and you're just bringing that attitude that this offense has been lacking for the last few years.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
So I was gonna say, with that said, I'm gonna shoot this back to the agent. Mike, we're gonna come in at $8 million a year for 4 years. We'll let you go out and shop that, but we have some other kind of business to do and things to look at. But we'll throw that out there as kind of a lifeline right now, and we'll see what the market holds for you.
Hey, don't move my locker.
All right, so that's what we're going to leave things with him. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next guy, and that's going to be defensive lineman Calais Campbell. He's announced that he's going to be coming back to play next year, but obviously we need to work out some kind of deal with him or see if he wants to test the market. I'll start with you, Brian, and kind of get your thoughts. Impact wise, money wise, just kind of what we're looking at here with Calais.
Sure. So he's probably the classic 1-year deal guy. However, our cap won't work that way. When you have 20 million, if he's, his average on his prior deal was 12. He's not a 12 million a year guy. They would probably build a deal, 8 million ish, and maybe with some incentives in there. If he gets to 5 sacks, he gets 500,000 or something like that. But for the Ravens, it can't be a 1-year, $8 million deal. You got 20 to spend. We're going to spend on a few other players, I'm sure. We talked about one center, another perhaps. I'm sure we're going to get to safety as an issue. So an $8 million cap hit would be really hard for them to be able to handle if they want to do other things. So he's a guy you do a 3-year deal. He gets $8 million this year between his bonus. So you get, let's say a $6 million bonus, $2 million base salary. So there's his 8. He got his 8 this year, but that $6 million bonus gets spread out over the 3 years. That gives him a cap number of 4 this year. And then, the deal average is 8. He's probably not going to be here in the 3rd year. He may not even be here next year. If he's not here next year, then you do have a $4 million dead money cap hit. But you can, the cap's going to go up. But, it's not the end. $4 million dead money used to be a bad thing, a terrible thing. Now it's okay. We can handle that. It's not the end of the world. You hope to get 2 years out of him. And of course, if they win a Super Bowl, he's going to retire. So that's the only bad thing about getting a Super Bowl, win the Super Bowl, maybe. But if you play well and he plays well, and he needs one more bite of the apple, you get that 2nd year out of him probably. So it's not the end of the world if it's structured something like that. So I think he's a guy. If he wants to accept that deal, then I think they can make it work. And I think they can make it work this year's cap and it not be too terrible on their future either.
All right, agent. So my cap guy laid it all out for you. So it's there for you to take. This is the best opportunity you're going to get to be in Super Bowl contention. Obviously when the trade was made, you were excited. We ran into a lot of injuries, but we back. We got the players back. We're trying to build a bully again. Let's go.
Yeah, I think the posture is a little bit different with a guy like Calais. Like, he's made money, right? He's made money in his career. I think he's at that point where, and you heard him during the Super Bowl broadcast he was doing for Sky Sports. You know, that Super Bowl bug kind of bit him in that moment. He wants to win a championship, right? And there's only going to be a handful of teams that you think are legitimate contenders to do that, right? And I'm not saying that he couldn't, offer his services or look at what kind of deal he could get from one of those other contenders, whether it's KC or Buffalo or, even, God forbid, I don't think he would go to the Bengals, but even if he went to the Bengals, you never know. You never know. But I think that he's always sounded like a guy that liked it here, that kind of integrated himself into the Baltimore community. I think he liked playing in the defense. I know they've got a new coordinator coming in, but I don't think Mike McDonald is going to be a drastic departure from some of the stuff that Wink was doing. There'll be some differences for sure, but I don't think it's going to be drastic. So he'll have that familiarity. I think he's only a handful of sacks away from getting 100 too, I think, right? He's like 6, maybe 7 away from getting 100 sacks, career sacks or something like that. So all of that familiarity, all of that comfort, plus you are playing with a team that you believe in. I mean, he always sounded like a guy who really believed in Lamar. Like, he thought they could win a championship with Lamar. And I don't think everybody feels that way. You talk to different people around the league, or you listen to other people around the league. So I think he really buys in to Lamar and his ability. So yeah, I don't think he'd have a problem with accepting a deal like that, in my opinion. Because like I said, I don't think he's out there trying to chase the biggest deal he can get at this point. I think it's about trying to win a championship, being in a good situation, a good fit, teammates and coaches he's comfortable with. I think that kind of stuff matters more probably to him now than not that, I mean, the money always matters. Don't get me wrong, but it might not be top priority at this point in his career.
Man, look, we got the agent already agreeing to it. He bought in on our argument, so we're good.
I would say it was a different posture with him. With Bradley, I'm like, you need to go out there because I think we can get somebody to bite. Calais, I mean, same thing. Like I said, he could go to one of those contenders and maybe they throw him a little bit more money. But you're kind of going to be starting over again in a lot of ways. And I don't think you have to do that here.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts are, Chris?
I think the sentiment with this team that we've seen just from the players themselves is there's some unfinished business, and they're chomping at the bit to go back into this 2022 season when this starts and really show what this team was supposed to be if it wasn't for the injuries. And I definitely could see a guy like Calais wanting to run it back for all the reasons that Mike said, just being an older guy, having a up and basically relocate and have your kids go to different schools and have to get used to a new place. It's like, you don't want to be doing that at 37, 38 years old. You want to have them be in a comfortable situation that they're familiar with, and especially with the team that they have, they like Mike said, they could regroup and run it back and try to really shoot for that Super Bowl.
Yeah. So I think we were all in agreement. So I think we reached an agreement with Calais Campbell on a 3-year deal to return to the Ravens.
All right, that gets us to 16 mil to use, to still spend. It looks like we might be holding a little of that back for a center, whichever one. And who else we got?
Yeah. So we'll move on to the next guy. We're going to open negotiations with Patrick Ricard. I'll say this to the agent first and foremost. If you ask for Kyle Juszczyk money, I will end this call right now.
Well, look, let's be honest. Different skill sets, right? Juszczyk and Ricard, different skill sets. But I think the thing about Ricard is he's going to have more value to the Ravens than just about any other team. I mean, that's just the reality. And when you look at how he's kind of evolved and morphed his game, he's gone. Obviously, we know he went from defensive line to fullback. But even last year, when Boyle was out, he played a lot more kind of like wide tight end, did a lot more of the stuff that Boyle had to do, kind of like on the line of scrimmage blocking, point of attack blocking. Now, look, when Boyle was in his prime, there was nobody better at that kind of stuff. So I'm not saying Ricard was at that same level, but I think that, he did a yeoman's job. This is not easy, putting a guy like that out there to block a DN, right? Blocking, I was just rewatching it recently. He's out there blocking Yannick Ngakoue and Max Crosby one-on-one that first game of the season. These are not easy assignments. There are not a lot of guys with that kind of designation and body, we call them fullbacks, H-backs, whatever you call them, that kind of body type, who can block guys like that. And he's able to get that done. So obviously he's got different value. And that's why I think he might be able to ask for a little bit more from the Ravens than maybe what his market would be, because he's just probably not going to be perceived as, at that same level of value to other teams that he is to the Ravens. And I think he knows that. I think his agent knows that. So he seems like another guy, though, too, who likes it here. Just, seems like a gregarious guy, outgoing guy, likes his role on the team, likes the teammates. I think he wants to be here. But again, he's a younger guy, different situation than Calais. So you never know how long, and he saw it firsthand this year, guys dropping like flies. You never know how long you're going to have in this game. So this could be an opportunity for him. But yeah, I think with him, I don't have a number because I wasn't able to see any projections out there for him. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's maybe just a tick more than maybe what people might think for a fullback, because I think they're going to get locked into that. They're going to be like, oh, he's a fullback, kind of like they did with Boyle when they did Boyle's deal last time. Like, oh, how are they going to pay him that much money? I don't think it was that much. But I think based on what his role is, people were like, that's more than what you should be paying a blocking tight end. I think that's what people primarily saw him as. Whether that's fair or not, I think that's kind of how the fan base kind of perceived him. And I think you might see that similar perception with Ricard. You guys have probably heard it. A lot of people who they don't even want him out there on the field. They're like, put Prochet out there, put Wallace out there. They don't want him on the field. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think you really grasp, the value he provides and the things that he could do with Boyle out. Now, if you get a healthy Boyle back, which is an if, but if you get a healthy Boyle back, that might change things a little bit. Then you might say, we might be able to give this Ben Mason dude a try. He didn't want to be here the first time. Now he's back. So maybe we give this guy another try. He makes it through camp and makes the roster. Who knows? Or maybe Eric Tomlinson can be 40%, 50% of what Patrick Ricard was. So I don't know. I'm making both sides of the argument, which is a terrible thing to do. When you represent a player.
Well, and I think that's because it's a tough valuation. It really is. I mean, fullbacks in general is a tough valuation, unless you're a guy like Juszczyk, who clearly is going to catch 60 balls or whatever it is, and is a weapon that way. I think you're absolutely right. I think he's more valuable to the Ravens than any other team. And is there a team out there that's even going to, test that? Our offense he fits our offense. Our offense is certainly, more unique than most, the way they run it. So, he's asking for Boyle money apparently, so that's now he's still, it was a short deal, but his average per year, he's still the second highest paid fullback right now. That's $3.6 million. Does he deserve a bump? He's going to be a free agent. He's not taking less unless there are no offers, and the Ravens lowball the hell out of him. So you're probably, even at $4 million, that's a slight raise. But I don't think he gets. Somebody's going to come there, or the Ravens are going to go there, because I don't think the Ravens can go in and say you're only worth $3 million to us now, unless they're totally revising the offense, or they have an heir apparent, which seemingly was what Mason was supposed to be, but obviously that didn't work out very well. So, I think he's probably, Juszczyk's at 5.4. I don't think he touches anywhere near that. I don't see how I don't see how Ricard gets to 5. But as you mentioned, he took a lot of the Boyle role, and he's got the argument, well, I did Boyle's job. Boyle's worth, 5.5 million a year, I think Boyle is. So I'm worth that much. It makes sense on paper. I'm not sure, unless he's going to become a true tight end for somebody, I don't see that role. But you got a lot of creative offensive coordinators out there who might just say, I can do something with this guy that nobody's done, like Roman did the first time, but take it a step further, perhaps. So as the money guy, I'm going to say, a 4-year, $16 million deal, maybe a little higher. We can get that cap number down, in that case around $3 million if we want him bad enough. I can't see going over 4.5 million a year.
And I think I would actually take that. Patrick might not like that, but I think because you do run that risk. That the things that you're talking about, Brian, those are unknowns. Will another team, create a role, develop a role for me, find a role for me in their offense, the way that the Ravens do? He has a very defined role, and now multiple roles that he can play within the Ravens offense. And I just don't know that you can bank on that for other teams. So, with other teams. So I feel bad, because I think from the player side, you're trying to get these guys the most that you can. But I think you also got to say, hey, look, but this is maybe a little bit less than what you were probably hoping for or looking for, but your role on this team, and how this team values you. You're going to play. You're going to be an important part of what they do. You're going to be out there every Sunday, doing different, and all the different days that they play games now, as an important part of this offense. So I don't know. I think that would be reasonable in my opinion. I would be surprised if he was one of those guys who were like, nah, I don't think I can do that. I think I need to go out there and see if I can get something better somewhere else. If I was like a Justin Houston, okay, that's something different, right? If I'm like, even Justin Houston is not what he used to be, but those kind of guns for hire kind of pass rushers, somebody will throw you a bone if they're in a bad enough situation, right? KC did with Melvin Ingram or whatever. Somebody will or Steelers. I guess it was the Steelers first, and then he went to the Chiefs. Somebody will throw you a bone if you've got some pass rush ability. So that's different. But with Ricard, I'm like, I think you should probably take this deal. That's what I would tell it.
Yeah, I think the contract that Brian laid out is about where I am. I would maybe squeeze him a little bit more, just because I struggle to find the fit for him outside of Baltimore. I'm looking at these teams around the league. I think, maybe Miami with Mike McDonald coming in there, and, they're probably going to be a run-centric team. And, maybe he come in there, bring them some attitude, bring them, that lead blocking kind of presence. But other than that, man, you look around the league, and I struggle to find the fit. And
New England.
Yeah.
Because that's the kind of Belichick kind of guy, and if they want to protect Mac Jones, and they obviously, what was the game against Buffalo? They threw the ball 5 times, was it, or 3 times, or whatever it was, so they can definitely run the ball, and I don't know if they use a true fullback, but he might be a guy to fit, if they have a fullback there who's a rookie, then maybe that doesn't make sense. But that just seems like a fit to me. So, and I guess because they took Ben Mason too, it just seems like, there's always these things back and forth with us for whatever reason. So that would be one I would think would be a possibility.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
They've got a guy. They do have a fullback
there.
Do. Why Ben Mason couldn't get on the field. It's because they did have another guy there. I forget his name.
Jacob Johnson.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. But yeah, Belichick loves those kinds of dudes. Ricard seems like a dude he would love. Playing fullback, the fact that he could, line up and give you some defensive line in a pinch. I think he loves those kind of guys.
What was the wide receiver many years ago? He ended up playing corner for them in critical games because their corners were all hurt.
Troy Brown.
Right. Yeah.
The more you can do, he loves it. And I think that's why they have those similarities because, their whole evaluation system, Ozzie learned it from
Right.
Jensen,
Right.
and then Eric learned it from Ozzie. So I think that's probably why they see players as similarly as they do. Because they were actually, it was something on TV about that recently. And they were talking about some of the old guys, whether it was Phil Savage, some of the old personnel guys who were here. And he's like, look, Ozzie took it and kind of tweaked it and put his own little spin on it here and there. But he was like, it was basically Bill's system.
Yeah.
I imagine they've continued to kind of use that at its core, throughout.
Right. So I'll hit you on this, Chris. I think we're pretty comfortable with the 4 for 16 that Brian laid out. What are your thoughts on Ricard?
So I'm kind of gonna pivot a little bit, and I think it's time to move on from Pat Ricard. I love him,
guys. I knew it.
No, I love him. I love Pat Ricard. I'm not one of these people that are like, why is he on the field? I get it. The offensive line. Tell me how, Prochet is going to help, protect Lamar, when you have Pat Ricard who's going to be in there and, helping with the blocking and all of that stuff. So I'm not one on that train when it comes to Pat Ricard criticism or anything like that. I think he's a great player. He fits the Ravens. Mine is just strictly about positional allocation when it comes to the money. We have Mark Andrews. We have Nick Boyle. Nick Boyle, who might not even, be the Nick Boyle that we signed. We still don't know. He came back, but then he had to go back on IR because he just wasn't right. With Pat Ricard, that'd be 3 guys who are in that tight end, fullback position group where the Ravens are pretty much paying top dollar for those 3 guys. And when you look at it, is that going to take you over the top for Patrick Ricard when we can maybe take that money and use it for a veteran tackle or a safety or, a higher impact position, so to speak, a more premium position than fullback. And like I say, I know how important the position is for the Ravens offense, but I just wonder if putting all that money into the position group is a wise decision.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even though I'm not supposed to be saying this, quiet as kept. If you look at this draft and the way it's projected, pretty deep tight end draft. Not top heavy for sure, but all of the guys who really study that stuff, like Dane Brugler and all these other draft guys, say that 4th round, a lot of tight ends.
Yeah.
4th round, and a number of H-back types too. There's a kid up in Maryland, Cheek, I forget his last name, but there's a lot of H-back type of guys there too. So you could see this as maybe that that Dennis Pitta and what's the other dude's name, where they took both of those guys at
Ed Dixon.
Ed Dixon.
Could not that they would necessarily double dip, but just the fact that there's going to be enough volume there in terms of tight end where they could probably take one or an H-back type of guy and then kind of replicate what they've done with Pat Ricard. And if that that guy comes in, he competes, whatever. You've got Ben Mason. I mean, I think it kind of makes sense. And just for the record, last thing I'll say, I am not an anti-James Prochet guy. So if people say, "Oh, this guy is James Prochet," oh, James Prochet. Me and Chris talked about that during the year. We thought him and Tylen should have been playing more snaps over Sammy. I mean, Sammy had just got to a point where we were just like, "Hey, I think we've kind of seen where Sammy's at. Let's see these young guys out there a little bit more." So I'm definitely not against James Prochet. There was some other people I interacted with on Twitter who didn't want to see Ricard. So maybe they'll get their wish if it plays out the way Chris is talking about. But it makes sense. It makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. So
I think it's not something I like. It's not something I like. I don't like it, but sometimes medicine doesn't taste good. So sometimes you just need some of that.
Yeah. I mean, can you find a reasonable enough facsimile at a third of the cost, or maybe even a fourth of the cost when you look at it? So,
I think his name's
sorry, Pat, we didn't put you on the contract. We'll have to send you out there and let you see what you can find, but we're gonna hold off for right now.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair.
Yep.
So yeah, we have one more guy that I want to get your guys' thoughts on and possibly negotiate with is veteran edge Justin Houston. He was pretty solid for us last year. Being nice to bring him back as a veteran amongst these young, edge rushers that we have on the team. I'll go to you first, Brian, and kind of get your thoughts on him as a player, and then maybe some contract options there.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. As you said, he played well. He's another interesting evaluation because he went from 8 or 9 sacks in Indy, sat out free agency basically, asking apparently back in the reports where he was asking for $10 million a year on a long-term deal, and then he ends up taking a 1-year, $1.5 million deal. So he's certainly worth more than that. But the question then becomes how much more, and how reasonable is he going to be, considering he lost himself a lot of money last year. And to be honest with you, he had 4 sacks this year, so it's not like he put on a show on his 1-year deal to get the big deal the next year. Now, I mean, obviously there's all kinds of variables, and he's going to be 33, maybe. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think he's 33 now.
He's already 33, so there's that, and he's more than a pass rusher, and that's something that just 4 sacks isn't necessarily the end all be all when it comes to how good a player is. I always say that one of the reasons Terrell Suggs, he got a lot of sacks, but one of the main reasons he's going to be in the Super Bowl is he was so good doing other things too. I mean, you can be great at sacks, but when you're breaking up screen passes left and right because you're reading it as soon as the ball's snapped, that, and then it's obviously setting the edge. Those kind of guys are incredibly valuable. So, but he's going to be a tough valuation because is he worth $5 million a year? Probably. Somebody will probably go there. Is that too rich for the Ravens? My feeling is somebody's going to offer more than the Ravens are going to be willing to offer him. So if the number's $5 million, I think that from the money guy's perspective, we can't go more than $5 million a year.
So that puts it in my court. Yeah, I know. I think one thing maybe working in Justin's favor a little bit is kind of the state of the outside linebacker room right now. You got 3 guys who are going to be returning from injury, 2 projected starters in Tyus Bowser and Odafe Owe, and then you got Dalen
so you're gonna go to your leverage? That's what we're doing.
I'm just saying, you got 3 guys, who you were expecting to play, significant roles, all coming off of injuries. Tyus, he suffered his. Was that in the Steelers game? Was that the last game? Of the game before?
Yeah,
the last game.
Yeah. So he tore his Achilles.
Dalen Hayes is coming off injury too.
Yeah, Dalen's coming off. So that's leaving you with, who do you got in there?
Ferguson.
That daddy.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm just saying, you might be able to do a little better. You might be able to get to 6 or 7. What you're looking at in there. But to me, his situation, I don't want to take too much more time. We've been at it for a while. Would be similar to kind of what we did with Bozeman, just different numbers, but similar in that, like, hey, here's our deal, right, from the Ravens' perspective. Here's our number. Go out there, see what you can find. If it doesn't work out, give us a call. Similar thing. I would not be surprised if he takes a similar approach. Let me go out there. Let me see what I can find. And then, you see where it goes from there.
Yeah, I think that's likely because, like I said, I just think he's a tough valuation at this point. If he put up 9 sacks, then you'd have your answer. But the 4, weren't all his fault. Obviously, everybody had trouble getting to the quarterback. So, I just think that's where, it's that test the market, and we'll check back and we'll see where we are.
Yeah, that's my other leverage point, Carey, is, hey, you fired your DC. It wasn't my fault I couldn't get sacked.
Right.
He's the reason why I couldn't get sacked.
Right. And Ngakwe couldn't get sacks here last year, and look what he did in Oakland this year. So,
Guys, places, they put up numbers. I'm just saying, give me let Mike McDonald, let me come in there. You saw what Aiden Hutchinson and David Ajabo did for him in college. Let me come in there and get some action like that. I'll put up 9.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I'm glad you spoke of college edge rushers because I do have the 14th pick. I can take one of these guys and let you go. So
you can definitely do that. You just check my resume. Let me know how you feel.
But yeah, you guys make a good point. It's especially like you said, when he was asking for 9-10 million and to end up settling for $1.5 million, you just don't know where his thought process is. Is he going to be trying to recoup some of that money back, or has he kind of settled in and say, hey, I had to take a lot less than what I had bargained on. Let me lock in for something solid and, a good situation. So, it just kind of depends on what his motivations are going to be.
Marcus Peters, get back on the phone. Marcus apparently recruited him heavy last time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because they played together in KC.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
how great it was. He said, "You're gonna love it here. It's they run things the way that things should be run. They let you be yourself. All those great things. They take care of your players. Hey, look, we got a new assistant trainer coming in here, right? I won some kind of like Trainer of the Year award. This guy's gonna help extend your career. Who doesn't like that, right?" So maybe he'll come back and he won't, necessarily look to get that $10 million number guy.
Right.
That's your possibility.
That ship has sailed one way or another.
Not realistic at this point. But yeah, he could be another guy like Calais Campbell, like Chris was saying, the kind of running back mentality. Like, hey, this team was supposed to be different. It was supposed to look a different way. And injury really robbed us of that. So let's bring the band back together and let's see if we can, do what we all thought we were going to be able to do. Especially if you're doing it on those 1-year type deals and say, hey, you know what, if it doesn't happen, then, we'll see where we are after 2022. But let's put this thing back together and see if we can go get a championship.
Yeah. So, in line with the number that Brian put out there, that $5 million, I think we're going to do the same thing we did with Bozeman, throw that out there and, let them go out there and test the market and see what comes back. But now we're going to go ahead and hit the market. And what people don't know is Chris, being my Ozzie Newsome, every year he's going to tell me one guy that I have to go and get. And, he's not going to sugarcoat it at all. This is my guy. This is who I want. So we're going to go out in the market and we're going to talk to Ryan Jensen now. And we're going to try to get Chris's guy back to Baltimore. So we're going to open those negotiations. Brian, what do you think as far as the player, as far as what type of deal you think that we could swing with him? What can we afford to shell out for a guy like that?
Sure. So he's older than you would expect because his first couple of years he was on the practice squad, I think his first year, and then he was on IR a year early on. I'm not sure. He's definitely he's at least 30 now. So he's a center. The age is generally not too much of a problem there. His last deal averaged $10.5 million, I think it was. He's probably getting a raise. I don't think he's getting less. I mean, he's coming off of several very good years, obviously with Tampa. With a Super Bowl ring, so he comes back as a Super Bowl champion with a lot to offer. So, I mean, his valuation. What's the top center's about a little under 15, I think, 14 something. So Jensen's probably asking 13. I'm guessing that's probably going to be his range. That would be people. People want us to step out of our old set ways. Well, that would be stepping out of them for sure. Because, like I said earlier, they've never paid for a center. I guess Matt Burke's probably the highest paid center they've ever actually had. We're still at 16 million in cap space this year. Again, we can. I mean, if you want a guy bad enough, you can make him fit. So you bonus, you get an option bonus, so you spread it. Spread that bonus money out into a second year, so you don't have to worry about it this year. He gets if you up his second year base salary, you probably can get his cap number in the 4 to 5 range without backing it out too hard on the back years. So it can be done. Yeah, I mean, it could be done. So, do you want to go, 13 million over 4 years, per year over 4 years? I don't think you go 5 on him given his age. Right. I think you can figure that out down the road, unless you're really just trying to spread it out. And that last year's is kind of a dummy year, and instead of the $10 million bonus over 4 years, you're spreading out over 5 just to get a little extra, relief each year. And then you deal with a little bit on the back end in that 5th year if it gets that far. So yeah, I mean, I think it can get done.
Yeah, Ragnow, OTC has Ragnow at 13.5 a year.
Okay. All right. Well, I never say never, but I don't see Jensen going over that given that he's 30. But I could see him, he's going to be pretty sure he's the top free agent on the market, and most would consider it. So I think he'll push that. So that's where I'll go 13 a year.
Yeah, I think that's a good price point too, because Corey Linsley got 12.5. So I think right above that would be a nice sweet spot for him.
Yeah, I'm on board at that number. I think with him, when you look at this team, a lot of people will him and haw about, throwing the ball more, doing all these different things. At this core, this is a team that wants to build a bully. And, they want to get downhill. They want to run the football. That's how they win games. That's how they're going to continue to win games. As far as the passing game goes, it's not like anybody is telling you have to go out there and throw it 600 times. You have to be able to throw it efficiently when the time comes. But, they are unique in a way that everybody's playing nickel and trying to get smaller and playing too high. Well, here comes this Ravens team where you can't do any of that. So I think I like the idea of bringing in a Jensen and kind of leaning in on that uniqueness as a team. So, if everybody is cool around the room, I think I'm good to go that 13 a year for Jensen on a 4-year.
Here's the one question I'll ask. I'm good with it, and maybe we can do both. But would you, if we can't do both, would you rather spend that money on a center or a tackle? Now maybe we can do both.
Well, I mean, tackle's going to be hard just because any tackle out there is going to get paid more than 13 a year. And I haven't looked at offensive tackles on the market. There's the guy from New Orleans, he's going to get 17 a year or more, even though he's over 30 now too. I don't remember who was after that, who's the next guy, but yeah, I mean, that's where, you're looking at I'd only need 4 more million. If I'm going to spend 13, should I go to 17 on a tackle? I feel like they're going to address tackle in the draft. Yeah. I think because you need a tackle, but are you bringing him in to start? We get to Villanueva again. Are you bringing in a left tackle to start at right tackle, who can play left tackle? But does he want to come here to play right tackle if he can play left tackle? So I mean, the top guy out there is Brown. Obviously, is Orlando Brown. He's not coming back unless his mood has changed. And they're not going to move. I don't think even. I mean, I'm not sure. Even if Stanley is healthy enough, however you quantify that, they're not moving him to right tackle. So I don't know that they.
Moses to come in. Maybe
that's a guy. That's a guy. They waited. Well, I mean, he got released after they signed Villanueva, but that was a guy. To me, that was a classic Ravens move. or
Oh,
Leno when he got released by. Now he got a nice deal from the Skins or Commanders. He got a nice deal there at the end of the season. But yeah, I like Morgan Moses, the guy I think you can get for. I mean, I think this year he was at like 4.5. So his age, you probably get him 9 to 10. I think you get him you probably get him for less than Jensen. Because he is truly just a right tackle. So yeah, I mean, that maybe I would go with that one because it's cheaper, and two because it's a tackle. But then the question then with him is can he switch to left? Because I think he's been a pretty exclusive right tackle his career.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm not sure that solves anything other than you also draft, in the first or second or third, a guy that can play both sides. So I mean, this is fun and all. I would be surprised if they go for Jensen, not because I don't think it's the right move. I just think again they don't spend money on the center, Yeah.
And if you wanted a tackle who could play both sides, you could. We talked about this a little bit on Twitter with Trent Brown. Now he's got the injury stuff in recent years, but he's a guy that's played left and right tackle. The only reason I'm throwing out tackles is because I'm probably a little more pessimistic about the prognosis of Ronnie Stanley and where I think Jawan James might be at. Like, I think I'm not an anti-Makari guy at tackle. I know a lot of people are. I think he showed that he can be a solid right tackle. I'm not saying that there couldn't be a guy that's an upgrade over him, because I think that there could be. But I think before he started to get banged up, he was playing pretty well there at right tackle for a while before he started dealing with some stuff. But I would say either Trent Brown or Morgan Moses would be an upgrade over Patrick Carey for sure. But I worry about Stanley, man. I think, Chris and I talked about this, like coming back, playing that first game, and then not kind of knowing what was going on for a couple of weeks and then getting shut down. Just that whole thing was just kind of weird. And then Jawan James, we just don't know. Nobody's seen him. Yeah. I guess he got in some practices towards the end of the year last year, but we don't know.
Yeah, and not drafting a tackle last year really came back to bite them. I mean, if you drafted a guy in third round or something like that, I don't remember who was there, and obviously, I don't think they went in saying we're not worried about it. The board falls the way it falls. So I get that, but I would have liked to seen them back up, whether it was through the draft or whether it was another tackle to back up. Both of them, just have that swing tackle, a veteran swing tackle. I mean, going into the season, I mean, whoever thought Makari was going to end up being the right tackle, and maybe they thought that all along. I don't know, or maybe it was desperation. I feel like it was more desperation, and they got a little bit lucky there. So yeah, I mean, tackles. I mean, to me, that's the biggest need on this team. So I'm totally with you on that. That's. But I definitely see the utility, the great need for a guy like Jensen too. So I'm not the general manager. I'm just the money guy. So if the general manager says 13, we'll go for it. We'll put a $6 million cap number on that. So we got he and Calais. So that should get us down to what we got down to 16 for Calais. So if we do 6, so that gets us down to about 10 to work with.
Going back to that left tackle versus center thing, it's obviously a great argument because they already have 2 guys on the roster who could potentially fill in as a center.
Yeah.
Right now, we don't know who the hell is going to be the left tackle. Mm-hmm. Like, we can say Ronnie, we could say Jawan James, we could say Makari, but we don't know. At least if they lose Bozeman, we could say, okay, that's Tristan Colon. Okay, that's Patrick Makari. But tackle, I mean, we saw how much it killed them this year. And we know that Eric DaCosta, he's going to be a guy who's going to be very, very aggressive as far as addressing the glaring needs. We've seen it with wide receiver. We saw it with linebacker when he took Patrick Queen and Malik Harrison. So he's going to be a guy that's hyper aggressive as far as trying to fix the huge holes on the team. So I think, like you guys said, Mike and Brian, the tackle, that's probably the place where he's going to focus all of his resources on. in order to kind of remedy these holes that we had on the roster last year.
And I'd lean that way just because Carey and Chris know this because we're in some Twitter DM groups together. I think they do. I don't want to say they do the same thing. I think they repeat patterns in their player acquisition strategy just because they've had so much continuity with their GMs and with their approach to player acquisition. I think they repeat patterns. We talked about this with the J.K. Dobbins pick, right? That number, I was like, this is Ray Rice all over again. It's the same kind of pattern. They had McGahee. They had just signed McGahee the year before. And you're thinking, all right, well, why would you draft a running back in the second round? You just signed this guy. I just felt like I didn't know who it was. I said it was going to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire, so I was wrong about that. But I thought it was going to be a running back just because I think they repeat those kind of patterns. And I see the same kind of pattern happening again with center, and it's almost down to the way it happened was the same. Ryan Jensen, right? Like Brian laid out, practice squad, IR, bounced around guard, a couple other positions. His fourth year becomes starting center, hits free agency, gets a big deal. Bradley Bozeman played around a couple different positions, fourth year becomes a starting center, goes to free agency. And then they just roll that next guy, the next developmental guy who was in the pipeline. It was Bozeman before, after Jensen. Skura was mixed in there too. I kind of see Cologne or Macari as the next guy in that pipeline. It just seems like, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. This has been a pretty solid strategy. It doesn't necessarily give us like the best guy at center, even though Jensen got paid like the best guy when he hit free agency. And Bozeman's probably going to get a decent deal too. But it just seems like that's a strategy that's worked for them. I mean, I don't want to call it a strategy. It's an approach that's worked for them. And I can see them doing it again. And you don't have to invest a ton of money into that position when you use that approach. So that's why I'm kind of stuck on it, because I think they do repeat patterns in terms of how they approach certain things in player acquisition, just because they got so many guys who grew up in this system thinking this way. I'm like, okay, this is what we do. So it would surprise me if they went out and paid Jensen, but you never know.
And for the record, if I have to choose between paying Jensen $13 million or paying Bozeman $8 million a year or $9 million or $8.5, whatever it is, whatever number that we came up with, I'm leaning towards Bozeman because I'm cheap. I'm cheap, So and I'll go with that. And he's younger too. So if we're comparing those numbers, but if Bozeman is trying to go higher than that, then that's where I would lean more towards Jensen. That's my argument for it when it comes to Jensen.
Sure.
So I think you could sign a tackle if you can get one of those guys at a reasonable price. You certainly can still draft a tackle and should draft a tackle this year. And then I feel pretty good about it. Then I'm like, all right, at least I've got a veteran who I know can line up at right or left tackle. I guess that's Brown if you're thinking right or left. Moses probably more right. But either way, you kind of go into the draft with a little bit more assurance of what that position might look like. Just for me, because I think, like I said, you got centers on the roster, right? So I think that's a little bit different in terms of how you go into the draft. That's not so much of an unknown. Yeah, it's not going to be your starter from the previous year, but you've got centers on the roster. Tackle, they're on the roster, but just don't, kind of what they're saying. So that's just me. That's how I would approach it. I don't know who that guy is. It might not even be either one of those two guys. Maybe some other time. Maybe it's Riley Reef or somebody. I don't know. But some other kind of lower tier market deal, in terms of the tackle market kind of guy. Wouldn't surprise. I know they just did it last year and it kind of didn't work out, but I'm leery, man. I'm leery about Stanley James.
Yeah, and I mean, if you do, I think I wouldn't be surprised to see within those first 4 rounds you have a tackle and you have a center drafted so you get that extra layer in there. And if you if you sign a free agent tackle, you've got Stanley, the free agent tackle, James, a rookie, and then you've still got Macari. Now, obviously, he's the starting center. You're not worried about him being right tackle because you're not going to mess that. You're not going to mess with that. But his deal is such that they can play him anywhere. and he can play anywhere,
Yeah.
but they can plug and play him where if whatever doesn't work out so well, they can, so to speak, they can plug him in there.
Yeah, that makes me feel better. I feel bad. I've told Chris and Carey I really got spooked in 2021 by injuries.
Oh yeah.
big time,
Oh gosh, yeah.
more than I've ever been before. So now I'm trying to build redundancies into the redundancies at like every position.
Well, and that's where they messed up last year. Like I said, not getting a tackle, another tackle, whether it was through the draft or another veteran. I mean, that really, really hurt.
Yeah, and I think they knew they were kind of playing with fire. And usually, if you go back and look at their history, they always kind of play with fire with one position. Every offseason, there's always one that they don't quite fully address, and they're kind of, patching things together. It just so happens they patched this together, and then the tire just blew as soon as they started the car. So it's like, now it's like you have some guys there, but everybody there is a question mark. All across that depth chart is, just question mark after question mark.
They got one of those junkyard tires like I used to get back in the day. I go to the junkyard to get a tire. I had old cars. I'm like, I'm not putting a new tire on this car. Just give me a used tire. Mixed results. You get mixed results. You operate like that.
So, while we I think we're kind of on the fence on that last one, but I want to go to the market on one more guy, a guy that's kind of been bandied about on Twitter. He's been recruited by the best of the best in the Twitter space. The Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu. He's out there. He does fit a need as far as, bringing a guy in to have some range at safety. He's a guy that can get down and cover the slot and do some things. So I'll start with you, Brian, as far as what you see as far as a fit on the field, and then also, contract wise, kind of what you're thinking as far as what we could offer a guy like that.
Yeah, I mean, he is a free safety. A center fielder is something I've obviously lacked since Ed Reed, and the way they work their defense, the way they put their corners on islands somewhat at times. Having that guy that can make up for that mistake, is there's something to be said for. Or if that guy that can get the errant pass that's thrown in the middle of nowhere because we're finally getting pressure on the quarterback, and somebody who can track that down. So I mean, I think that role certainly, the past couple of years, or a couple of guys in the second round who kind of I would have loved to have had. Bates, that's been 4 years ago now because he's a free agent. I would assume is getting franchised by the Bengals. And then Holland last year had a great year for Miami. And he was a guy that wasn't really up there. He was one of the top safeties, but he seemed like he was more of a third or fourth round guy. And then he went early in the second. I think Miami took him pretty early. So good on them. I mean, they because he played great, and he made us look horrible. I mean, he was all over the field against us. That was for sure. So yeah, I mean, that's a spot. I mean, the only worry about Matthew is he's on the wrong side of 30. But his safeties, we've seen it. Obviously, Reed played well into his 30s. Woodson was back there in his 30s. To lesser results. Weddle obviously did very well this past year, or his 3 weeks this past year, I guess we'll say. So yeah, I think that's then it's just a question of money, and he's going to command a lot. And I think that's probably why Kansas City's not going to try to get him back, is that they just with their other big contracts, it just doesn't make sense. So is he $15 million on average? Certainly, he's going to push that. At least it could go higher, I think. It obviously depends on the bidding war. What we've done so far, you could make that fit. I mean, they've got, based on what we've said, and assuming they make, it's obviously getting Pete. Now, if they get Lamar done, you got no worries. And I don't think we cut anybody unreasonably. And, obviously getting Peters done is a big help in that cap space. But if they can accomplish those things, I think they can get him, and 16 million a year seems like probably the sweet spot for him. Maybe it's a little, maybe he's wanting a little more. Will the Ravens go that high for a safety on the wrong side of 30? I don't know about that, but I think they wanted him. They wanted him 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and unfortunately, we got the consolation prize, which is the gift that keeps on giving, in Earl Thomas. And that's another factor in this too, is his thing has not been settled, and potentially they have 10 million on the hook there. Now, given everything that's happened, and he hasn't played again, and the rumors of all the issues he's got going on, I don't think and everything that happened, I think that's going to be a settlement. And I don't, it could be a couple million. I don't think the 10 million is a concern for them. Fingers crossed, of course. So that they have space for that to deal with something like that. I don't think the PA wants to defend him on that when half of his teammates were saying they wanted him gone, and they don't want to set a precedent of, yes, if the player does this and this, you can void his guarantees. I think they'd rather it be a settlement and have no precedent for that to be for another player to rely on. You can't rely on a settlement. But if the Ravens were to win that grievance, I think that sets a bad precedent for all players, and the PA doesn't want that. But so sorry about that tangent. But so I think the safety we wanted then and didn't get, I think I don't see any reason we wouldn't want him now too.
Yeah,
Chris, what do you think?
Hard to argue against the Honey Badger. He feels like one of those guys who a little bit later in their careers, but become available through some means, whether it's free agency, whether it's trade, whether it's been on offense or defense. He just feels like one of those guys who is a Ravens kind of player, right? Just his mentality, the way he plays the game, how aggressive he is, how passionate he is about the game, how competitive he is. He feels like a Raven to me. Like he would just come in and fit right in to their culture, because I think he's all about ball. I don't think, we found out later that Earl had a variety of different things going on. I don't think Tyron is maybe into some of that kind of stuff. So I would love it. I know there's mixed stuff. I've heard different people out there say, he kind of did some of the, the playmaking stuff towards the earlier part of the year and kind of tailed off a little bit in the end. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. And I know I was having this conversation with a friend of mine, Denard Melton, at Denard Melton on Twitter, Fire Zone Show, shout out. And he actually said, in his opinion, safety is like a really high need for him. I think she said out of their needs, we talked about offensive line, talked about defensive line. But he said safety was like his top priority. Because he says, just getting some kind of playmaker back there in the secondary is just something they really, really missed. And if you can go out and find that guy, and I don't think he was necessarily saying the Honey Badger was that guy, but he was saying a safety. He had an interesting thought, actually. He said, what if you roll out Brandon Stevens and Geno Stone back there, draft a safety somewhere in the top 3-4 rounds that you like, move Chuck to like that star position that Jalen Ramsey kind of plays, that kind of slot nickel kind of position. It's interesting. I don't know.
Yeah.
I heard it. That's interesting. But I think if you got a chance to get a guy who's got playmaking instincts, and I think the Honey Badger definitely has those. I think you shoot that shot if you can make it work financially.
Well, they haven't been shy about signing safeties over the years with and paying them, pretty handsomely, with whether it was Jefferson or Weddle was a little less, but certainly Thomas was a big contract. So it makes you a little gun shy though, doesn't it? Because they all came with name recognition, and none of them really worked out exactly as well as you would have hoped. So I guess that's getting, Jefferson was not on the downside. The other two, I guess, were more on the back end of their careers. But but yeah, I mean, he seems like the right fit.
Yeah, I like the fit of the player. He come in and like Mike said, he basically has that Ravens DNA, like you see with Marcus Peters. Like, once they traded for Marcus Peters, it's like, yeah, that guy's a Raven. And it's the same thing with Matthew. The only thing I'm hung up on is the price tag. That's pretty hefty for a guy that's 30 years old. Hasn't really been the healthiest guy. Like, he's always one of those guys that's just banged up, and he's on the smaller side as far as safeties are concerned. So that is something to keep in mind going forward with him being in his 30s now. But as far as just the players concerned, I love the fit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can make arguments on both sides. I mean, if you're looking at free agency or looking at safety, a guy that you mentioned, Chris, in one of the chats, Justin Reed is a guy that's out there that, could be a facsimile of what Honey Badger brings to the table. And, we are all the biggest advocates of these young defensive backs on the roster, whether it be Brandon Stevens, whether it be Geno Stone, just go down the list of the guys that were in camp, or Darius Washington. I think we all have a great deal of confidence in the talent that these guys bring to the table. But like you said, Honey Badger is just a guy that just really just fits, but that price tag seems like a lot. So
yeah, and like you said with Justin Reed, he's a younger guy. He's only 25 years old, and he's a true center field safety.
Yeah.
So if he's younger, it's going to be cheaper. I mean, it's definitely something that I feel like they would want to explore and compare. I mean, he's not the playmaker that Honey Badger is, because what he's done since he's came into the league has just been rare.
Right.
There aren't many guys who can do that, but there are other options that are cheaper and younger.
Yeah.
Mike, he's got a relationship. Sorry, go ahead.
What did PFF put on Honey Badger's annual salary? Do you remember?
I'll tell you right now, they put 3 years, 16.25 AAV.
So it's 16,
30.75 guaranteed, 48.75 total.
Yeah, so that's 16. Yeah, that's and that's on 3 years, and I get the 3 years given his age, but that's another one that would be hard because you can't get that first year cap number down very far without pushing those last 2 years through the roof. So that's a deal that obviously they can play with it, but that's a deal that probably is hard for the Ravens to match, especially if for some reason he only wants 3 years, and he wants another shot at the apple, 3 years from now.
Yeah,
the thing I was kind of mad about Justin Reed was he does have that relationship with Anthony Weaver. Anthony Weaver was DC Texans for a year there. I mean, he was defensive line coach, but he was a DC his last year there. So, he's got that familiarity, and there's always a little bit, I think, of a recruitment element with these guys. You got relationships with them and that kind of thing. So that's something maybe to consider as well. And just one day, just talking about safeties, I think I'm getting old. So maybe I forgot. Maybe we did talk about this guy. But did we talk about Deshaun Elliott? Or we were just like, hey, he's.
Oh yeah, we didn't talk about
picture.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned him a little and just said that he's as a. He might be a guy that can get back just because of all the injuries, but then that's another question of, do you want him back because of all the injuries? But I don't think anybody's going to outbid them for him. I think he's got to take a 1-year deal somewhere, and I don't think it's going to be much. But, I think it's the same problem they've had the last couple of years, is that the similarity between he and Chuck Clark, and you don't have that center fielder. So did PFF have something on Reed? Was he in their top 100?
He's a little bit lower down the list. They have him down more than a little bit lower. They have him down at 90. They're actually pretty low on him. They've got him listed as like a spot starter, depth piece at safety. So they don't even see him as a starter, but they've got him at 3 years, $7 million, 13.5 guaranteed, 21 total.
Mm-hmm.
So they're pretty down on him. But everybody has different opinions.
Sure.
About
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And how they feel about that. So take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, it might be a nice buy low kind of flyer. See if you can, tap into some of that. Because I mean, projecting him to a different system and just a more stable environment than he was in Houston, you never know, something could click. Like you said, he's only 25. So
yeah. I mean, who thought Zadarius Smith was going to go out and have 13 sacks, the year after he left? I mean, even the biggest Zadarius fan, I don't think thought that was going to happen.
I loved him.
I
actually had to write him up for Scouting Academy when I was doing that, when he was going into his free agent year. And it was coming off the year where he had been hurt the year before, and then he came back another year and he kind of had like a lower sack number than he did his rookie year. And I was like, no, but it's there. I'm like, if you dig into the film, you can see it. But I didn't see 13. I'm not saying that.
No.
I'm just saying you could see that ability. But the other thing with Justin Reed, DeAnton Lynn, he was the secondary coach.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He knows Weaver. He knows Lynn. The age is definitely beneficial. The price tag looks like it would be beneficial. I think Chris is probably on to something as he usually is with that call. You might see a fit there for sure.
So I say we're gonna go ahead and close it out here. We leave with about 10 million left in space. You know how I like to dabble with players that get released by other teams. So I'm gonna hold on to that cash. See who hits the market. But all in all, I thank all you guys for what you contributed to this. I think it was a really fun exercise. I came into it just really more or less trying to learn and just get a feel. And, see how these things play out as opposed to going in, oh, we got to get this guy, we got to get that guy. Kind of wanting to see how everything plays out. And I'll just go around the room for just overall thoughts. For me personally, it just, man, digging these couch cushions, man, trying to find some money, man, because it's tight around here. So, but I'll start with you, Brian, just your overall big picture thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it is tight. They have the ability to make some space. DaCosta made there was one comment he had about how the cap had gone back and how they did not have the cap space this year to go out and fix a problem in midseason or attempt to fix a problem. They did it with Peters. They tried with Ngakwe. But because of all the injuries and that, all the cap that took up, they didn't have that extra amount. So when we talk about in our little exercise, there's 10 million there. Well, maybe some of that is held in place so that they can make that move. So I don't know that there was a tackle that was going to be available, but they could make a trade for somebody. One of my pet peeves is the Ravens are, we hear they're cheap or they're not aggressive. Well, I mean, when they went to get Peters, he cost them $6 million in the middle of the season. When they went to get Ngakwe, it was something along those same lines. So, I mean, that's not being cheap or not aggressive. Right. That's going out and addressing. Now, Ozzie never made those kind of deals. I guess Monroe he picked up midseason, but that was the only midseason deal he ever made. And certainly, DaCosta seems to be more willing to be aggressive and take chances. So it's nice to have not just your extra space for injuries going into the season, but now because the trade deadline seems to be a little more active than it used to be. It's not certainly not like baseball, but or basketball, but it's having that ability to go and fix a glaring problem in midseason. I mean, when they got Peters, everything changed. That year it really did. And there were some other small moves as well, but so that's something that when we talk about cap space, not a bad idea to have that little extra there as well for that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I would say I'll go next. That's something I've definitely learned. Just listening to Brian and listening to you other guys talk about this is not wanting to be caught in that situation again. Like they were last year. I know a lot of that was not their own doing per se. I mean, nobody expected to be hit as hard as they were with injuries. But I think you can, those years as tough as they are, especially the way it ended, I think you can learn a ton from those kinds of seasons, just in terms of your roster construction, how you manage different things. We've already seen they're going to adjust their training program, at least from a personnel standpoint. I think you can learn a ton from those kinds of years, and just this exercise. And then Brian talking just a minute ago about some of those moves that they made in season under DaCosta. It really kind of has been funny to me, like especially with the Rams winning the Super Bowl, and this whole conversation about they don't go all in like Les Snead when you think about these moves, right? I mean, now you can go player from player, you can compare player to player and say, okay, well, Jalen Ramsey versus Marlon Peters, or Von Miller versus Ngakoue, or you can do all that all you want, but he did go out and try to acquire high level talent at premium positions in the season, right? Because he thought that they would help the team win. So this whole thing about they don't go all in, they have a conservative approach. I think they're trying to win the Super Bowl every year. And I think they do whatever they can to try to do it. And I think if anything, to your point, Brian, Eric is more aggressive, is probably a little bit more aggressive along those lines than even Ozzie was. So, that whole thing has kind of been funny to me. And I think most people, Brian, you probably understand this better than most people. I think most people who study the cap and look at the cap would probably not recommend what the Rams have done.
Oh, no.
In general. It paid off, it worked out, but it doesn't seem sustainable.
Right.
Yeah, and how many examples of those are there in history where teams who push all the chips in, how many examples of those end up panning out? I mean, we've seen the Saints do it. We've seen Green Bay do it. And, yeah, they've gone to the playoffs, but they don't have the rings to show for it as far as pushing all their chips in the way the Rams did. So it's not like this is the new blueprint. Everybody has to follow it. There are different ways to win. There are different ways to construct a Super Bowl winning roster. And I think people should not be prisoners of the moment and realize that there are multiple ways to construct a Super Bowl winning roster. And a lot of it comes down to luck and health at the end of the day. So, obviously luck and health definitely was not on the Ravens side, but you cannot say that they don't have the talent, because even with those injuries, they were still in prime position to be a playoff team. And that's a testament to the coaches and also, the scouting department and Eric DaCosta for constructing such a deep roster that is able to compete week in and week out, despite not having multiple Pro Bowlers, all pro players, and then, the last month of the season not having Lamar. So there's multiple ways to do it, folks. Multiple ways to do it. It's not just one cookie cutter way, and that's it.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Yeah, the way the Rams did, I mean, the margins there are incredibly thin. They're a team that they couldn't afford to absorb a quarter of the injuries that the Ravens did and still do what they did, win the Super Bowl. They just didn't have the depth to withstand that. And, luckily they stayed healthy and they were able to pull it out. But, kudos to them. I think Brian Windhurst says this, and he talks about it in basketball. Winning a championship means you never have to say you're sorry. And I get that. And they won't have to say they're sorry. But, 4 years down the line when McVay is a stay-at-home dad at 40 and not coaching anymore, and their cap is in shambles and they don't have any picks, then we'll be having a different conversation.
That head coach will be saying they're sorry. They'll be
All right, so we're gonna close it out here. Again, thank you guys for checking us out. Like, rate, subscribe. And we'll be back during the offseason with more great content for you. And we'll catch you on the other side.
Yep. See you.
These my Dallas make it hurt.